I'm seeing lots of familiar faces. I'm also seeing lots of new faces and names. Maybe even some people who just recently joined. So that's really exciting. Um, we have a lot to cover. We have some stellar intellects here to share wisdom and knowledge. So I know I'm excited to bask in such wisdom, and hopefully collectively we'll all have learned something. So what I'm gonna do, we have a lot to cover. We're gonna try and get through a presentation and then leave room for Q&A and like a robust conversation afterwards. So let me just press share. And are you folks seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. So welcome to working collaboratively, right? Or as we've been calling it, everything you want to know about collaborations. This Lunch and Learn is a little bit unique because it's not just one person putting it together. This is the result of a collaborative effort, right? Something we've gotten really good at because we've been collaboratively working to develop the Kids Comic Studio anthology, which you could see in the little logo in the corner. But we'll get into those details shortly. So let me move forward with an introduction, right? What we're here to cover, right? The information we're hoping to offer you folks should be useful if you're looking for collaboration, answering a call for submissions, hoping to organize your own collaboration or anthology, or if you're considering crowdfunding or self-publishing. I kind of switched that around. Apologies. Um, so going forward, we'll kind of try and cover it from the biggest picture down to much more specific, personal questions and whatnot. So we'll start with traditional publishing, indie publishing, and then we'll kind of take a look at working with an artist if you're a writer, working with a writer if you're an artist. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about crowdfunding and specifically anthologies, and that'll lead us into a pretty robust Q&A. The one thing I want you folks to keep in mind is to keep an eye on the chat, right? We're hoping that questions will be held off towards the latter half of the presentation. So we ask that you use the format I presented there, a little cue so that we can spot it. We'll also be asking you questions in hopes of getting insights from you. So keep an eye out for that. We'll post questions in the chat asking you to answer with a why or give a little short sentence that explains a certain POV. So something, open up the chat window, have it on the side because we're hoping that'll be active as well. So that said, let's just jump right into things, right? So I'd like to introduce to you my friend David Quinn, um, writer extraordinaire. He's written for traditional comics publishing, and he's also pioneered some independent comics publishing. So, yeah, without further ado, let's imagine a round of applause for David and let him share a couple of minutes of insights from his POV.
Thank you, Patrick. Um, I know many of you, and I hope to get to know all of you. And I wanted to say, to start as context, I hope that what I say seems elementary to you and new to you. And there's something to learn and something to hear you hadn't thought about in my sort of way of thinking. And maybe some of it you already are familiar and comfortable with. Um, that way, when we get to the Q&A, you can ask me all the hard questions I didn't get to. Um, I think, I'm assuming, this could be totally wrong, but I'm assuming most of you want to own your own work. When I say that, I mean you are in a situation such as I am with my new comic for teens, The Addiction, where I co-own it with a co-creator and we're self-publishing it. Now, we could have also taken it to another publisher, and in fact, we have been interviewing other publishers to try to broaden our platform. However, I'm assuming that a lot of you want to own or own a piece of what you do. If I'm wrong, I can speak to what we call work for hire creation, because I've written other franchises like Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, uh, Aliens, and even The Amazing Mets. because I've been doing this for a while. However, I'm focused where I live and where I think what I think about 95% of the time is storytelling involving 360 degrees of media, where we can also have toys and licensing and movies and TV, and where we are owning our characters and our creations. That's just my sort of feeling for this group. A lot of you are self-driven creators who really want to own a piece or own all of the work that you're putting your hard work into. For me, I mean, there's not enough money in selling out anymore and writing someone else's character. There's just not enough money there to make it worthwhile. So I'm being really blunt there. Pardon me for that. Um, I'd like to say, and this is the first bullet I have here for you, is that storytelling is a relationship art and a relationship business. That seems really simplified, but I just always go back to both of those things. When you're making the art, it's about the relationship, the communication, the listening, the empathy, the understanding, the patience, everything that you would have with all your other kinds of human relationships, maybe even animal relationships in your life. Um, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that come up in traditional publishing. One is working with an editor, and another is working with collaborators that you may not even know. Chances are, if you are working on a book like uh, my indie horror comic for adults, Faust, you met an artist once in a comic shop and you got along and you had a good conversation and then you created a book together. However, other times you may have sent your children's picture book manuscript to Penguin Random House through an agent and got a meeting with Phoebe Ye, who wanted to buy it. And then you were working with Phoebe, your editor, and you were working with an illustrator that you would never meet and never talk to.
Let me make sure.
So that all comes up. So working with an editor, man, just like agents, editors can be a great, great relationship to empower you to make your books better, make your business better. Um, at the same time, you really have to know how to go into that relationship. I think you should know what kind of feedback is the most actionable for you. And by that, I mean, maybe you have a proclivity to say, I'm going to go through the first time and I just want to talk about think big picture things like the story itself, the characters itself, the world itself. I don't want to ever get into the dialogue or line by line readings of how things are described until we've already settled on everything that happens and where it happens and who it happens to. Another thing is if a note doesn't make sense at first, your editor tells you something and you just go, what? Why are you thinking about that? Um, okay, so you have some work to do internally when you get that because they can say anything and they're seriously there to try to help you make the story more powerful and more successful in the business of publishing. So, and another thing we'll get to a little bit later, they're really busy too. So keep that in mind. So you really have to think, well, okay, I don't understand exactly what, let's say Phoebe or somebody else said, although I didn't actually have that experience with Phoebe. Um, I don't understand what they said, but something pulled them right out of the story at that point. Something threw them, and all of a sudden they were not thinking about the little dire wolf that the adventures are happening to, but they were thinking about David's writing. And they were like, I don't know, that's not working. Why don't you try? Whatever it was that they said, even if it doesn't work for you right away, try to remember that that threw them. And now the hand of the maker is always visible on our stuff, sometimes down to fingerprints, right? You're always going to detect, oh, yeah, that's Patrick. I see Patrick and that cute dog there. But, you will also want to get out of your own way and let the story be told about your characters. So just keep that in mind. Now, the final thing I'd like to say about editors, for now at least, is if you think you don't have enough time in your day, your editor is under a great deal of pressure from often a big corporate company, If they're a Marvel Comics editor, they're owned by Disney. And if they're a DC Comics editor, they're owned by Warner Brothers. It's a huge corporate that is trying to drive the profit center of each office to the max. So they're under pressure and they don't have a lot of time. So this is where that relationship thing always comes back for me. I learned this because I did a lot of writing consulting in businesses like Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, United Healthcare. I went and I did marketing writing for these companies and making myself useful. You want to be useful. You don't want to be the problem. You want to be the solution to the problem. So your editor's busy. Listen carefully. Do the best you can with what they give you. um, Chances are you didn't hire that editor, right? So you're not going to fire that editor. They could possibly fire you or just drop your book. So you really want to listen and remember that they're under a lot of pressure and you've got to still do your job. So now I want to talk about working with artists. I'm a writer. Some of you write and write for artists. Others may be artists who also write, or sometimes you write for artists and sometimes you draw for writers. We've got everyone here, but what I want to talk about is when you're working with an illustrator. And the thing that I always go back to, just one of those big general things, is that I don't want to tell the illustrator how to draw what they draw. The illustrator is going to do that so much better than I could. But I do want to give them what happens, and I do want to give them um, as specifically as I can and as concisely as I can, not wasting a lot of words, a strong sense of the content of feeling. Because, I mean, after all, that's what the story is. We see people do things or other kinds of non-people characters, right? We see characters do things to each other. We see characters have their feelings, and we see characters work through their conflicts. That's really, since that's all it's about, you want to be able to give the what do I say? I said give the artist the least they know to tell this story successfully. Now, what if you don't know who you're writing to? Maybe you'll never talk to the artist. Well, then you want to watch yourself with your language. You're not going to want to use flowery uh, metaphors like I'm drinking in the view, because maybe your artist is halfway around the world, speaks a different language, gets a translation of drinking in the view, and who knows what they're going to draw. So you want to be able to be very concrete, very specific, and again, kind of say the least you need to say to make sure that it's clear. Um, that book I mentioned at Penguin Random House, I never talked to the illustrator. We had a few notes back and forth, but it was all after the fact about what I really loved about what you did and how you got some of these. If I threw little background parallels, you always drew them. Like in in this book, the adult monsters are putting the baby monsters to bed, and in each double page spread of the rhyming picture book, which is a lullaby sung by the parents. Um, some kind of monster parent, maybe Godzilla, is putting baby Godzilla to bed. So um, I always had a parallel. Like maybe there's like out the window, oh, we see there's squirrels putting their babies to bed too. All the things that we talked about afterwards were so trivial because the main things were there. The main characters for each page were there, the main actions were there. And, at the risk of sounding too simple, that's really what you always have to remember because sometimes we forget and we try to, I don't know, we try to, uh, I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but sometimes we forget. And then I used to, particularly in the beginning, forget that it was not about how I saw it or how I would draw it if I was the artist, but it was about what it makes the reader feel. Um, Now, when you know the artist, and Patrick and I just did a story together, so I'll use him as an example. You're going to have nothing to fun in that area of what language you can use. I could drop on Patrick that Hannibal is god of noise on his throne behind his drum kit. His arms are whirlpooling around the drums. I can say that to Patrick because I know Patrick and we both love music and we're both talking about music all the time. And I know he knows what I'm talking about. So, um, there are exceptions and you'll find them, but it's about the content of feeling and it's about giving the artist the least that they need to know what they need to do to tell the story successfully. I don't know. I haven't been watching a clock, but I figure I probably used about enough of my time for now.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Once again, if you guys have folks have questions, drop a little cue, put them in the chat, and we'll come back to them. So to follow up on what David had to say, let's hear from Janna on traditional publishing.
Okay, well, I'm actually gonna maybe jump around a little bit. I have two slides. So the first question I have here is how to find collaborators, because I think that's something that a lot of people wonder about. And I just have two little bullet points here. Number one, be active in the creator community. And number two, work with agents and also editors. I should have put editors there, because obviously they can help with matching you up. But before I get into the details of all that, Patrick, could you go to the next slide?
Certainly. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, that. So this slide actually shows five separate projects that I have worked on or am currently working on that involve collaboration. And I'm going to really quickly run through each of them and how the collaboration happened, because I think that'll help us circle back to what I just said about different ways to find collaborators. So the first project there, Apart Together, the author I actually met through Kids Comics Unite, Linda Booth Sweeney. She took the Kids Comics intensive course, I think maybe the first year that we offered it. Um, so she had this manuscript, Apart Together, I really loved, and we tried shopping it around to publishers as just a manuscript and were unsuccessful. And I was convinced that part of the reason we weren't successful is because they just weren't seeing it. The editors weren't seeing it. Linda and I had a vision in our head of exactly what it would look like. So I talked to Linda and I said, well, what do you think about us finding an artist and then going back again and resubmitting to publishers? So she said yes. And I had this artist in mind, Ariel Rutland, who I actually found out about because she did posters for the library in my town. So this is an example of random connections. And I feel like you should not discount random ways that you might come across somebody who you eventually want to collaborate with. So Ariel, I had first discovered her work because of just seeing this beautiful local community poster she made. And then I reached out to her because I loved her work so much. And turns out she is a graphic designer. She actually designed my logo. So if you've seen the Janico lion logo, Ariel is the one who designed that logo. So I went back to her again then and said, would you be interested in children's book illustration? And she said, oh my God, I've always wanted to do that. So that's how that project came together. The second project, Bumble Brothers, I got connected with Steve because Steve Metzger and I worked at Scholastic at the same time. So we go way back. We didn't work together directly, but we were there in the office at the same time. And Brian Chattel, the illustrator that he worked with on the Bumble Brothers, Steve and Brian had worked together when Steve was an editor at Scholastic Book Clubs, I believe, and Brian was an illustrator that he worked with on a project through Scholastic. Now they had gone their separate ways, but they stayed in touch and were friends. And then much, much later, when Steve was retired from Scholastic and continuing to work as a writer, he had this one early reader graphic novel project. And he actually approached Brian himself before I was working with them. So they started working together, just the two of them, purely through friendship and having this project that they were both excited about. Then they came and found an agent who was me. And then I represented both of them in going forward and trying to sell the project to a publisher, which we did. Okay, Sunburn is by Andy Watson, who's one of my clients. Simon Gain is the artist, who is not one of my clients. Andy and Simon, also longtime friends, work together in comics industry forever and ever, developed this project completely together, sold it to Image without an agent. So I was not involved in selling this to Image Comics. So far I've shown you like several different ways. I'm going to keep going because there's all these different ways that these projects can come about. All right, the fourth project, you see this image right here? This is for a project called Windfarer, middle grade graphic novel that I'm representing the writer, Debbie Fong. Maria Vicente from PS Literary, a different agent, is representing the artist, Joey Roditis. Debbie, the writer, is the one who found the artist. And I believe Debbie told me that she just found Joey's work on social media and she really loved Joey. I think they were commenting back and forth on each other's works, kind of got to know each other a little bit only as like online friends. And then Debbie had this idea for a project and reached out first personally to Joey and asked if Joey would be interested in collaborating. And once Joey said yes, then respectively, they each went to their agents and said, we were interested in working together. And then all four of us basically hammered out a collaboration agreement. And then we've been going out to publishers. And guess what? Even though this project has two agents who are both very well established in graphic novels now, we have not sold it to a publisher yet. And the reason I tell you this is because even if you have, both of you have agents, it's not like having an agent is a magic, formula that for success, unfortunately. So I love this project, but we haven't been able to sell it yet. And then the final example is I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it, is a artist who, this is such a random connection. One of my clients was collaborating with a writer on a project that actually ended up not going anywhere. But that writer worked at a school with this person here, Peter Donahue, who has a really popular Instagram about color theory. As you can see, he has 402,000 followers, and it's really technical about color theory. And he wants to do a book about color theory that's sort of like Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, but only about color theory. And it's really cool. I'm very excited about it. But he needed an artist. He is sort of an artist, but he's not a comics artist. And he wants this book to have comics in it. So we needed a comics artist to do that part of the project. So originally I approached one artist that I thought would be a great possibility. Actually, I thought this person would be perfect, but they were too busy and they couldn't do it. So they said, hey, how about my buddy who I think would be really into this project? And it turns out his buddy is interested in it. So again, another example of me now working with another agent. We're putting together the project, haven't even pitched it to publishers yet. But I hope that gives you a sense of all the many different ways that collaborations happen. And I would say that in every example, the key is you don't like find somebody online and then cold email them and ask them to do spec work for you. That's one of the worst ways to try to get a collaboration started. Usually you have to build a relationship first, which is what David talked about. In every case that I just discussed, there was an existing relationship before the collaboration started. Okay, so really quickly, money stuff. I know people really like to know about this. It's very important. Most often, what I see with collaborations is advances are split unequally, with more of the advance going to the artist and less of the advance going to the writer, because the artwork on a graphic novel is so much more labor intensive. It's incredibly labor intensive. So it's really fair that the artists get more of the advance. However, what that ratio is kind of up to the two of you to figure out. And oftentimes, if the project originates with the writer sort of has to ask themselves, like, what do I feel is fair? And then basically make a proposal to the artist and say, like, is this okay with you? And if it is, then you can move forward. And then royalties, though, royalties are split 50-50. And if there's any other person who's a specialist, like a colorist or a letterer, they would usually be paid a page rate that is a work for hire. They're not getting an advance against royalties. All right. That's it for me.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
back. Sorry about that. I had the leaf blower going on behind me. Anyway, so now let me introduce to you Marie, who's a writer, and she's had some success working with an illustrator within the space of independent publishing. Marie, would you like to go into some details?
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, I'm a writer and I consider myself super lucky because since I joined Kids Comics, I've had the opportunity to work with several amazing illustrators, and that includes for the upcoming Kids Comics anthology. It's just awesome. And the one I'm going to talk about today is a collaboration that led to crowdfunding that led to a trip to Comic-Con in San Diego. So pretty awesome. So first of all, the way that my illustrator, collaborator, Sarah, and I met was we were both taking the Kids Comics Intensive Masterclass. We were both from different backgrounds. We both kind of had our own projects going and our own reasons for taking the class. And we both wanted more practice. So I was coming from an academic background and I really wanted some practical practice writing comic format. And so I put a question out there. Anyone want to, practice with me? And Sarah answered. And so our messages turned into emails, and our emails turned into Zoom calls. And we kind of realized we were on the same page, and that even though we had our own projects and ideas going on, we wanted to experiment and create something new, something that was basically just for us, something that we wouldn't necessarily share because we were still learning and still practicing. And this is where the expectations versus reality part comes in, because as a writer, I had a lot of projects and ideas and things going on. And one of them was this idea of writing a story based on two little stuffed animals that I had when I was a little kid, and I would take them out on nature hikes with my dad and get them all sandy, and we would have adventures and solve mysteries and things like that together. And I always wanted to turn that into a story. So in my head, my characters were two, a little blue bear and a brown raccoon, Mickey and Racky. So I brought this idea to Sarah, and she's looking at it and she's like, yeah, but what if they were kids? And suddenly everything came together. I'd been like struggling turning this into a story for so long, and as soon as she said that, this light bulb went on, and within literally 3 hours I had written out a script to The Mystery of the Shell Tree that became our first little comic experiment, The Adventures of Mickey and Ricky instead of Nicky and Racky. So sometimes that's one of the great things about working collaboratively is that you're creating this sort of shared world space where you can play together. And since it's not just in your own head, you're getting a bit of validation. It's in two heads now. It's this shared place where you both can play and experiment. One of the big things though is when you are working with an illustrator, even if you have this place where you feel kind of safe and you want to play, it's always super important to be upfront about what you feel that you need, what's important to you, to be very honest and to have clear communication. And that's where the time and accountability comes in. Keep regular tabs, keep regular meetings, be flexible about that too. Life always happens, and maybe you might have to skip a meeting or a week or two. But try to be as regular as possible with the meetings and keep open communication. And if you want to change something, don't just change it, be honest about it and say why. If something isn't working, be open to playing with it. Sometimes panels and scenes have to be these rigid, immovable rocks in the story, like they can't be moved, but there are others that are super squishy or spongy or movable. So play with it, move around with it, and be open about it. Experiment, test, and play. And that's a lot of what our Nikki and Ricky stories were about. We were turning our own experiences, learning to collaborate with each other, into these two characters that literally use the scientific method to experiment, test, and play in their own little world. And so that's part of the benefits of an outside perspective too, having a partner to work with. When you get nervous, when you're not sure, when you think, oh, this is never, ever, ever going to be a thing, they can help you think, yes, this is a real thing. This is worth it. And we can just keep going. And even if you make a mistake, it's like in a play, just keep going with it. People won't know. So that fear of making mistakes, that fear of this thing isn't going to be perfect. It's not going to be that thing that I had in my head. Well, no, it's not. There's a sharp difference between what you might initially think of as an author and what you can actually do, what you can actually make, what it turns into. So don't be like blocked by that. Just keep moving, keep experimenting, keep learning, keep doing. And then as you look back, you can start to see that you are making progress, and it won't be perfect because nothing is in the real world, but it will be real. And so one of the things that we did do once we were experimenting with Nikki and Ricky, and the opportunity came to submit to an anthology, and we tried that, and we made a little short comic that had nothing to do with Nikki and Ricky, and we sent that out, and it got published in Comics from the Kitchen anthology. And so after that, we were feeling a little more confident about ourselves, and the opportunity came up with Patrick. He was doing the crowdfunding crucible at Kids Comics, and since we had managed to make something real outside of our own little bubble, we're like, maybe we can try this. Maybe we've come to a point where we can actually try this, and other people might actually be interested enough to support our project. So I signed up for the Crucible with Patrick, and we started a crowdfunding campaign with Crowdfunder. And that's where the believing in the value of your work comes in. You might have this, like, oh, they call it imposter syndrome. It's like, I'm not worthy. But sure enough, people will start to be interested. And all throughout, we were keeping our meetings up, maintaining accountability with each other, and thinking about, okay, what can we offer to our potential audience to make them curious about us and to make them want to support us? And that's where we're thinking, well, since everything that we've been doing is about experimenting and playing, why don't we try to think of something that would be fun for them to play with, some kind of summer activity, because it was taking place during the summer. And we came up with a bunch of worksheets where Nikki and Ricky would guide a reader or a kid, through these different ways of using the scientific method to solve their own nature mystery. And that eventually brought us from basically just wistful hopes of maybe getting a newsletter started to having more than 100 subscribers. And so that was super exciting and very encouraging for our crowdfunding. And that eventually we turned all those newsletters that we made into a workbook. So ultimately, we did have the successful crowdfunder. We were able to make a trilogy of graphic novels plus the workbook. And then because our crowdfunder was a success, we even had this shoot for the moon, pie in the sky stretch goal of, if we could do this, if we could reach this goal, then we'll go to San Diego Comic-Con. And we actually did. We actually made it. They helped out and they sent us there. So we got to bring all this to fruition because we met each other and played with each other, and we were scared, but we worked with it, And so that's the experience that we had. That's our little case study about how we managed to go from basically zero to crowdfunded. And now Sarah can talk about her side of it, I guess.
Excellent segue, thank you. So yeah, from the writer's point of view, so let's take a look at the artist's point of view with Sarah.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay? I'm at my parents' house with questionable internet, so if you ever can't, somebody give me a yell, okay? Yeah, so Marie kind of told you we met in class, and my biggest recommendation, my biggest, most important recommendation about finding a collaborator is to say yes, even if you're not sure yet. To look at something that sparks interest and joy, and don't worry about whether it's going to be instantly profitable. Don't worry if it's going to be, instant hit published. Just go out there and do something that you're interested in, to learn something. So Marie was coming from academia. I was coming from a background in architecture and architecture illustration. And one of my big stumbling points transitioning into kidlit, picture books and comics is drawing people. Kind of important, big important step. I just didn't have the practice, and I just hadn't had the hours in. And so one of the reasons I suggested turning Nikki and Rocky, the stuffed animals, into children was because I really needed practice drawing kids. So it was super exciting that Marie was also on board with turning them into kids and writing a story. That really goes to brainstorming, being open, putting things out there that aren't precious. Marie talks about doing things that were scary. For me, I'm more prone to be an ADHD person who sees a new exciting thing and goes, squirrel, yes, do it. Jump in with both feet. Don't worry about the consequences. And so one of the best things about our collaboration and what I look for in future collaborations is that we balance each other. Marie will see an opportunity to do something and say, I don't know, maybe it's not for us, or maybe it's too scary. And I'll say, actually, that sounds great. Let's do it. I'll say, I think this thing's done. And she'll say, no, we can make that better before it goes out public. And so I think a good collaboration should flow. And I think that's really important, is to just to talk a lot when you're working with somebody, because good things come of it. So, speaking of the crowdfunding, wasn't it terrifying? To me, not so much. A big thing that I recommend in crowdfunding and in illustrating and collaboration is to put your ego to bed a bit. For me, I went to architecture school at a place that was kind of famous for giving negative critiques. I spent a lot of my education being told all the bad things about what I'd done. And they did that to prepare me for a career in which I was doing my work for other people. I was designing somebody else's kitchen, and people were going to tell me when it wasn't right. So coming into collaboration as an illustrator, I think one of my skills that I really appreciate now is that I don't put my whole ego into anything I do. No individual picture has anything to do with my own self-worth. And so if a picture isn't communicating, if people aren't super excited about my book, that's okay. It's just a thing that went out there, and maybe it's not the best thing in the world, but I still made it. So for me, the crowdfunding was an experiment, just like making the books. And we went to see if we could do it, and we found out we could do it. And I found out that I could illustrate a 32-page comic book in a certain amount of time. So that was what was really valuable to me. The marketing was more frightening to me. I had a very good friend say why the workbook that Marie was talking about came about because I had a very good friend who said, well, why should I give you my email address for a newsletter? Why should I read your newsletter? She's like, you're a good friend of mine, I would do it. But if I wasn't, why would I do that? And so we decided to make that reward. And then I would just say that to everybody here, if you're having a lack of confidence about where you are, we attended at Comic-Con. A bunch of us met up. Patrick was there and Brigida was there. We went to a presentation with Jean Luen Yang, Dan Santat, and Thien Pham. And one of the really cool things about their talk was that they had a history together. They were making jokes. They were friends. They weren't necessarily giving us the secret to being a successful comic maker. But what I saw in that was people who had worked together and collaborated and helped each other for years. And now they are successful. So I think, all of us here at KCU are where we need to be to build a career. And, who knows where we'll be 10 years from now. So I would just say, if you get a chance to collaborate and it feels right, give it a try.
Awesome, thank you. So I skipped ahead accidentally. So let me just go back one slide to give Janna the floor regarding formalizing a collaboration agreement.
All right. Let me see here. I actually did a thing. I posted inside of Kids Comics Unite, I have a collaboration agreement template inside of the studio space. So if you are a member of Studio and you want to be able to access this agreement, you can just go there. But actually, as I'm talking, I'm realizing this is a general KCU event, not a studio event. So I'll have to repost this in the general KCU. So anybody who wants to access it can access it. So basically, this collaboration agreement has just the basic elements that you would need in an agreement. And I have the sections that you are going to need to fill out yourself in red. But of course, everything in this agreement can be amended to reflect your own personal situation. I don't know if I should walk through this collaboration agreement like clause by clause because that would take too long. So I think I'm just gonna let you guys ask me at the end. If anybody has questions specifically about agreements, then we can talk about that. But for now, just know that there's a template and you have access to it.
Excellent, thank you. So that brings us to the topic of anthologies, right? We've heard mention of the anthology that Marie and Sarah first got into. I know the common wisdom that I've received is that one of the easiest way to like break into comics is to get yourself in an anthology, right? The bar is lower. There are fewer pages one has to commit to, and you have a whole inadvertently you end up with a whole team of people trying to get the project done. So there's your definition of what an anthology is, right? A published collection of stuff. And then why an anthology? Because low bar, great potential, once again, excellent networking opportunities. You know, the people who I consider my anthology siblings are people who have really helped me make progress over the handful of years that I've been in comics. And, you know, it's been a great joy to offer opportunities and to try and help them out with their projects. And it's that tightening of that network that I think helps drive many people forward. A key detail is that there's no one way anthologies come together. And so just this year, there's a handful of us members here who will be appearing in anthologies. So let's use one as an example. And for that, I'd like to give the floor to Cesar to explain how he ended up in Draw the Line.
Thank you, Patrick. That's an awesome lunch and learn. I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I'm Cesar, and I'm gonna just share my experience with being a contributor to an anthology. Back in 2016, this project started following Trump's election. One comic book artist was really angry, and she decided to do something about it. And basically, she just posted something on Facebook saying, "Hey guys, I'd like to put an anthology together, a comic anthology together. Who would be keen to participate?" And we ended up being more than 100 people, more than 100 comic book artists, putting our name down to be included in this project. And basically there was no collaboration. We had a template, we had a page count, so we had a single page each, and we had a theme each. So we were assigned a theme, we were assigned obviously the template and a single page, and we were free to do anything. And we had a deadline basically, but there was really close to zero collaboration. And at the end, we started to by crowdfunding the project, and we weren't successful, but we still were able to print it and basically send a copy to each backer of our crowdfunding campaign. And later on, around 2020, I think, a publisher from New York bought the project and decided to make a new edition of it. So that was really interesting. We were involved with the crowdfunding effort, and that was pretty overwhelming because again, I think we didn't have, back in the days, I didn't really have any audience. Most of us were kind of beginner comic book artists, so it was really tough to bring the backers together. And obviously we failed, but we were still able to print the book, which was awesome. And I think that's pretty much it about this experience. And currently I'm involved with Kids Comic Studio for the next anthology, and the process is totally different. So it's really interesting to have the two perspectives. So that's me, really.
Excellent. Thank you, Cesar. Congratulations on the project. So another anthology which came together differently is this one, From Cocinas to Lucha Libre Ringside. It's a Latinx anthology. This one will also be coming out in 2025, and it was a little bit more selective in how it came together, right? So the editors, well, a little bit of history. The first anthology I appeared in was called Speculative Fiction for Dreamers. It came out in 2021. However, the comic that I had submitted, I had done in 2014. So just to give you an idea that sometimes these things take time. Spinning out of that anthology, Professor Almada put the call out for this other anthology he wanted to create with a specific theme, right? It was going to explore Latina culture through food and through sports. And so that was the general theme he provided. And then he sent out an email to his list of people he wanted to submit to. Beyond that call for submissions and that theme outline, we were just given a page range, 1 to 8 pages. Do what you'd like and submit it. So once I got that call, I based my submission on some comics that I had been doing as a part of my newsletter, and it was accepted. And then from there, it took a couple of years for the pieces to come together, and it'll be coming out this year, published through Ohio State University Press. So it's more of a traditional publishing format, which is great because it's a welcome shift from self-published projects to be able to say I've got a traditionally published work coming out as well. So like I said, these anthologies always have these extra opportunities that one should keep an eye out for. So mentioned here just to illustrate a different way for an anthology to come together. Also different than the very unique method that we're developing for the Kids Comic Studio anthology. It should also be mentioned that some members from our community are also participating in another anthology, and this is the Saw anthology. So I think I saw Edna in the chat. So Edna, if you wouldn't mind sharing, a quick sentence or two about how the Saw anthology differentiates itself from the anthologies we've talked about so far.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. The Saw anthology collaborators it comes from a pool of students who participated in the Saw Sequential Artist Workshops Graphic Development Intensive. So it's like this online intensive, similar to what KCU has done in the past with their intensive. But this is an offshoot of a bigger, like a program that's been in existence for a long time through Tom Hart. He runs a school in Florida, and but he offered the opportunity to learn more about comics through like online. And just to mention, this is not just exclusively kidlit, it's also adult comics and different types of comic creators. So being a part of it, you're automatically invited to submit. And the way they do it is they have a team of people managing the whole process of publishing, but it's still self-publishing. And so they have these guidelines of, they have the template, and you decide on how you know, what pages you want to include in it. And in that case, there's a lot of freedom in that. You can decide, you know, the number of pages, if you start on the left or right, bleeds, all those types of things, and what, you know, type of color and style. So yeah, that's basically the overview of it.
Thank you, Edna.
I hope that
So
helps.
so here we've offered you folks 3 different examples to set you up for the primary example we want to talk about, right? Like our Kids Comic Studio anthology, right? Let's Go. It's a Kids Comic Studio anthology. We'll be crowdfunding it this year, but let me share with you some details, right? It's going to be a smaller, like zine-sized project, right? We have the measurements there. It'll be about approximately 200 pages, depending on, you know, the end result. We've got about 33 contributors. Remains to see if they will all meet our deadlines, but the stories range from a single page comic to about 8 pages, right? It's mostly filled with writer and artists collaborating. No, it's mostly filled with writer artists, but there are a handful of folks collaborating. Like David mentioned, he and I are working on a project together. So once it's completed, it'll be available through KDP, Ingram Spark, but most importantly, we'll be crowdfunding. We'll be developing a crowdfunding campaign for it to have hard copies printed. And so, when's the crowdfunding campaign? Tuesday, April 22nd. So mark your calendars now and keep an eye out for it. We've already started working on a bunch of pre-launch activities. We've been really focused on developing a really high quality project, but we've been doing it in a unique way. So let me share with you a little bit of the structure that the 30 plus members have come up with to develop this anthology, right? So we broke ourselves up into a series of committees. Each committee would be focused on a specific aspect of the project, right? So we have the general publishing committee, and then under that are a selection of other committees, each one focused on a specific task. We've also developed working groups, which are much more specific, task-oriented organizations, right? Figuring out a publishing timeline. We have a working group specifically focused on the cover. We have a working group specifically focused on crowdfunding. So this workshop that we're all a part of, right? That's kind of been developed by the marketing committee to kind of communicate, you know, this project to a larger audience, to you folks, you know. And it may be that some people are hearing about this project for the first time. So let us know, put it in the chat if this is the first time you've heard about this project. We'll be promoting it through a blog, right? We have that blog at Kids Comics Unite. We're also launched a newsletter for this project. And we've also created social media accounts because we have the advantage of so many people wanting to make this project a success. We've been able to like play to the strengths of the individuals who are interested in, you know, communicating the message or creating, you know, helping make this project a success. And with that said, we have arrived to the Q&A section. So yes, so do we have any questions? I've been kind of keeping an eye out on the chat, but I've been keeping an eye out. My eyes have been going in every direction. So let's read what we have here. Lots of questions for everyone out there, right? Feel free to reply directly to this one. Right, the one question that we have for you folks, right, is what would you like to hear about us, right? I like to say that we can write a book on crowdfunding or on creating a publishing. I'm losing my words. Give me 1 second. We can write a book on creating an anthology, considering how much we've learned so far on such things like creator agreements or the editorial process or launching a newsletter, etc. So we have from now until our launch on April 22nd to try and offer people as much value as possible that would kind of demonstrate not only our passion and the quality of work that we're, bringing to this project, but also to kind of fulfill our true goal within this community, right? Where we are a learning community. So we want to be able to share our lessons with you folks. And we plan to do that through all of our various platforms, social media, the newsletter, the blog, etc. So I've just presented you with a series of links and hashtags for you folks to keep an eye out for. And then with that, I'd like to open things up to questions. Do we have any? A table at MICE would be so cool for sure.
Patrick, maybe you could stop the screen share so we can see each other.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Janna. All right. Should we take one of those moments of uncomfortable silence? I could use a drink. I see Jeff has raised his hand. Jeff, take it away.
A question for Cesar. Very cool about the anthology being picked up by a publisher. How did that happen, and what happened with, was there pay involved for you guys after that? I'm also fascinated by the fact that you didn't fund, but you were still able to print the book. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, so the platform that we used was called Unbound. I believe it's a UK-based crowdfunding kind of platform. And since the day one, we knew that even if, I think it's part of this platform, I don't exactly remember, it's been almost 10 years, so sorry about that, the details are a bit blurry. But I believe that since day one, we said that no matter if we were successful or not, we would use, I think, the funds from the backers to commit to printing the books. And it was enough for us to be neutral in terms of kind of, there was, in terms of the printing arrangement that we had. So we were able to print still and get a book to each of the backers. So that was awesome. And then one day, a few years later, we received an email from the editor who basically put the book together, who organized, who was the initiator of the project, and said, hey guys, we've got the opportunity to have our book, being bought back by this publisher. Would you be happy to basically give your work to this publisher, basically? So there is no money involved. We basically, each of us basically gave away our piece. Just for the survival of the book, of the project, kind of. It was a single page of comic work, so we were all pretty stoked that there could be still a future for the project. And I've checked on the website, it's still available nowadays, so it's interesting.
I have one quick question, and then I'll give the floor to Edna. But this is a question I would love for people to answer in the chat, right? We're hoping to spread the word of this project as far and wide as we can. So I'd be curious to hear from you all. What are the comics-oriented podcasts or YouTube channels that you listen to? And yeah, let's see some names in the chat. Let's see what platforms people turn to when they want to know, like, what's coming out there, what projects interest them. So I'd love if folks have that in the chat. And then Edna, please ask your question.
Yeah, well, it's just a question and a comment. I'm double checking that. Cesar, you said that you gave away the piece, so you don't own the copyright to your comic, or so you gave that away. Okay, so to distinguish Saw comics also as an anthology, we own all our copyright. So that's another thing that distinguishes that type of publication. Okay.
Awesome. So I have found a question in the chat, right? That's asking about how were we able to manage a schedule. It's been a tricky thing. We've been working on this project for nearly a year. I think the initial meeting that we had regarding this project took place in February. So we'll be approaching a year eminently. And since then, back in February last year, I personally was imagining crowdfunding this comic that summer. Talk about ambition. So here we are a year later looking at crowdfunding it in April. We've had a lot of cross communication. We had a whole team dedicated towards setting up an initial timeline. And then from there, we've been able to make deadlines a priority for each group, right? So we had the different groups looking at the timeline from different perspectives, right? There was the editorial committee who, was focused on submissions and when to submit, when to get in touch with your editor, with editors, right? Because unlike some of the anthologies we talked about here, there's much more of a tight-knit integration in terms of how the project starts and how the project may end up, right? There's some editorial feedback that's involved. The same is true for marketing. We had a marketing timeline that we have been adjusting consistently since day one, trying to accommodate such factors as market research and an awareness of where publishing is today, right? Like when we started this project, right? Who was even on Blue Sky? And yet here we are today, and Blue Sky is the hot social media platform for comic creators as of what, 2 months ago? So, timeline, giving ourselves lots of buffer has been key along those lines. We're also being asked to how much time did each contributor put to the project? I think that ranges from an hour a week to just show up at meetings plus X amount of time spent writing, reading responses, that sort of thing. So for some, I'd say it's been quite a bit. I would say that I've been to about 100 meetings, but what else am I gonna do? Walk the dog?
Patrick, one thing I would say is that the two questions actually interrelate with each other. I think part of the reason why we've been able to stay on track is because we do have such regular meetings. I think that's unusual and intense and has pros and cons, but it's been good because we really have gotten to know each other. And I think when you get to know your peers so intimately, you don't want to let them down, So that's a part of what keeps all of us on track.
Agreed. Yeah, we've taken accountability to the next level because
Yeah, we have.
we're accountable to each other within the smaller meeting, but then we also have this bigger picture of there are 30 plus people, some of whom I don't even know if I've had the chance to see on a Zoom call. I kind of recognize some names, but I just trust that they're doing their thing on their committee. And that trust gets fulfilled because every other week, we get these updates that show incremental progress. The gears are always moving forward just a little bit. Yes, Edna.
So I just also want to add here on the significance of being involved in creative projects with others. I've lately been listening to audiobooks like The Happiness Advantage, and studies show that it really does help your mindset as a person, not just a creator, to be involved with other people, to have social connections. And it shows that it really does raise your level of competency in work and all that, and getting through the hard times. So I think that comes into play too when you're in collaborations, is, you know, getting to know people and being a part of something with other people, that social connection.
Agreed. Yeah, we're all learning something. And sometimes there are lessons that are like we don't even consider, we don't even consider the value of that lesson until after, we've gone through the extra long meeting, or we've stayed up late to deliver that update or whatever. So, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more that we could learn once we've gotten to the other side of the crowdfunding campaign, right? We are really just only at a halfway point, right? We've just started the new phase of this project, which is, the publicity side, like getting it out to other people just as a concept, not to mention the actual, work of getting folks excited and getting folks to show up and pre-order their copy of this book when it's done. And I'm certain it's going to be excellent when it reaches that point. So I have another question for folks to answer in the chat if they'd like, right? And that would have to do with a hypothetical. Like, what if you were part of an anthology, or maybe you have been a part of an anthology? What would you use to market it? What platforms come to your mind when you think of like getting publicity for a project? I'd love to know. So if you have any initial thoughts, put them in the chat. I think I'll type one in myself too, because how can I say it? Like, not only is this podcast a member of the Kids Comics community, but they've already agreed to set aside time for us to kind of not just talk about the project, but for several members of our community to talk about their point of view within the project. And so that's Story, if I can spell, that would be helpful. Storycomics.com. So I know I've appeared there. I know the host Barney has interviewed Janna and a few other members here, and they've generously set aside some time to kind of put a spotlight on this project over the course of this year. So we're hopeful that they're not the only ones. So let us know.
Patrick, maybe I should answer Bob's question about who's designing the cover for the anthology.
That would be great, Janna.
So we have actually a very tiny working group that is one person from the design committee, one person from the marketing committee, and one person from the editorial committee, who are working together to basically do the whole cover. They are going to be bringing mock-ups to the publishing committee to give us options, but we're going to be deciding from their options. So I feel like I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I have total faith that they're going to do something totally amazing. And I think one of the things I'm really glad about is that it is a small group, because I think when you have large groups, as everyone knows, committees tend to get bogged down. But I didn't want it to be one person either. So I'm hoping that we came up with kind of a good balance there.
I think so. And like I like to say, I trust that these people will bring their A game, just knowing, I know these members to varying degrees and have admiration for the experience that they're bringing to the project. So I'm excited to, I look forward to the surprise of seeing something I haven't even bothered to imagine what the cover will be like. So I just want to like be impacted by it. And so Maritza asked,
Patrick,
yes.
I probably have to go in like 1 minute, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, you've got me as a co-host. I can still linger for a little while. If you have any final words you want to use that last minute for, Janna.
I'm just making you the host, Patrick.
Okay.
Well, Maritza asked, how did we choose a printer? So I'll just answer that question, and you guys can feel free to add more. But basically, we did something that I advise people not to do. So I always say, like, when you're getting started with a project, just don't bite off the biggest possible thing. Start with something small. So if you want to make a graphic novel, start with a mini comic or a zine. But with this project, we're like, okay, we're going to try. We want to have print on demand so that the book is available on different platforms for people to buy. But we also want to make a printed book so that every contributor can have their own book. And we also can learn from the process of working with a printer, which is different than just uploading files for print on demand. So therefore, we have gone through the process of researching different printers. We picked one which seems to be likely the one that we are going to go with. It's going to depend, we have to wait until we get the funding through the crowdfunding campaign, see how much money we have, and then we can place our print order. But we also decided we want to do the print on demand option because that's another way to get our work out there, and we want to learn that process as well. So we're learning the whole thing basically. That's how we picked our printing options.
Awesome. Thank you, Janna.
All right, I'm gonna have to take off.
Everyone say farewell to Janna.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, Bob. Still keen printing. Bye.
All right. Well, I'm available to linger here with you folks for a little while longer before I run off to another publishing committee meeting, which will happen later on today. But does anyone have any more questions? We have some deep wisdom in our bench right now that we should make good use of.
Patrick,
Mm-hmm.
are those links going to be the links that you posted? Are those going to be posted in an email or on the site, or are they already posted on the site? All those links that you posted previously.
I will post them in the chat right now. They are in a variety of locations, right? You can go straight to kidscomicsunite.com and you'll see a little menu item that says anthology. Just below that, you'll also see the menu item that says newsletter. For those of you who have yet to subscribe, we have a new issue of our newsletter coming out imminently. And so for those of you who haven't been keeping track, we've already covered a few things. Like we've covered the basic genesis of this project, and we're now going to dive into some more specifics. But I have them in the chat, our various social media accounts, although I'll say X is kind of dormant. And then you can also find our landing page as well as our blog. And most importantly, right, the newsletter sign up for those of you who have yet to subscribe.
Thanks.
You're most welcome. Any other questions? Sure. I mean, at this point, we're in extra innings, so we could just have a much more informal conversation. So, Bob, let's hear it.
Well, I'm part of the Writers Loft, and I know a lot of authors, and we have book bazaars, and it's a very active area where I'm from, and there's like 15 bookshops. There's Wellesley Books, there's The Unlikely Story, there's The Unicorn, there's Aesop Fable. So bookshop tours seem to be really popular, and library tours. Like I've gotten to know the librarians in multiple towns because we would do our talks at libraries, and kids would come, and there'd be crafts and there'd be things that the Writers Loft would set up. So there's sort of like a formula that they use. Like they'll have 2 or 3 authors, or somebody would do maybe an art station. Somebody would have like an art station for kids and things like that. Is there plans to do something like that? I know it would be my initiative to probably get them involved, but I sort of have a two-sided blade to this because I want to promote my story too. I have a Kickstarter. So I think going to those and promoting the anthology and saying, hey, I'm also working on this, and doing a cross-promotional thing, to get people excited about my project as well as this one, or other people's. I can even promote other people's, just really
Yeah, I'm going to answer
Yeah,
yes,
played out.
absolutely. That is part of the marketing team's desire. I'm part of a group that hasn't met yet, but we are wanting to put together some resources for doing that. So resources for, whether you're going to do a class, whether you're going to, is it presenting to children and there's going to be an activity? Is it presenting, to adults and marketing? So 100% yes. And I think we will be very, open and wanting to cross promote,
Yeah,
because I think for all of us, that's the goal, right? Is to all get out there and help each other sell comics and get people excited about comics.
yeah,
On
yeah.
top of
Co-
that, we've created the marketing committee has created a marketing cheat sheet that has a lot of these options open. So that our theory is that we all come from a super diverse pool of experiences, and so we're kind of trying to set up easy to learn systems so that someone who has experience with a school visit can kind of lend their knowledge to those people who will be doing a school visit for the first time. And then also those people who have appeared on podcasts before can maybe like share some of their insights, or people who are more familiar with consistent newsletter posts can kind of help set up or help provide like to-do lists or little kits that would allow other members to kind of launch their newsletter for the first time around this project. And so here's a term that I learned that I'd like to share with you all. This is a term that I picked up from some of the authors that I am anthology siblings with, right? We've appeared in anthologies together, but they are a little bit further along on their publishing journey. And they call it leading from behind, right? So there have been instances where I've been a part of an anthology where the editors aren't as accomplished with like crowdfunding conventions and with marketing conventions. They're editors. They just want to deliver a quality book. And so, but because of the financial need to crowdfund, printing fees, or even the fees that creators will get, right? It kind of came to those people who have that experience to lead from behind, to kind of offer what they, without being the figurehead in the spotlight, to kind of move things forward and lend their expertise or lend their network and their platforms to such a project. And so that's what we're kind of also looking to do. We're looking for those people who can recognize the value of a project such as this, and then offer, what resources they can in terms of, social media presence, newsletter subscribers, or specific know-how, like, 3 things you should do, 3 things you definitely shouldn't do at a school visit, like that sort of thing. And then once again, those are the things that we want to collate, assemble, and then make them presentable for newsletter subscribers and for readers of our blog. I'm going to do the Janna technique and just take a moment of silence. So if anyone has any questions, if there's any insights if any of our members, right, if the people who have put this presentation together have want to add on to some of these questions or answers, now's the time. I wasn't sure if someone was raising their hands or waving goodbye.
The only other, I have to leave in a moment, but I would say the only other thing that I would say about our crowdfunding experience is that, yes, we had a successful campaign. I had a lot less interaction with the workbook pages and the promotional materials than I expected. I was a bit disappointed at the time. I was thinking people would send things in, that there might be a conversation, and there really wasn't. However, a lot of signups happened locally because I went and did a presentation at a local children's bookstore. I thought I was completely out of line because I didn't even have a book to publish, but they were very happy to let me come and do some drawings for an hour. A lot of people signed up there, and they happened to be people in my child's school. So they're community members that I've started to see in person in the year and a half since we've run this crowdfunder. And so I would just encourage you to not discount your efforts in marketing, because what I get now is, oh, you're the person who did that comics thing. You're a comic writer. You're an illustrator. They know who I am now. They remember doing the things with their kids, even though they didn't reply to my newsletter. So, just to go along with my say yes to things is, even if you don't hear feedback from your work or your collaborations, you're still doing something. It's still out there. You never know what dividends it's going to pay in the future.
Edna.
And with that, I must go.
Bye, Sarah. Thank you. I want to tag on to what Sarah says about being out in the world. And I had something come up that, was surprising, because I would just start with saying, get to know the librarians, get to know people in the bookstores, just get to know people who love books, because they're going to be a really big source of information. Before I was published, I made friends with librarians. Of course, I always went to libraries, but they remember you. I hadn't seen this one librarian. I went to a branch library to pick up a book that I had on hold, and she was there, this librarian that I knew a long time ago and hadn't seen since the pandemic. And then she started asking me about my books, and it turns out she's interested in having me come to the library as a presenter. So she's waiting for information from me. So just serendipity, things happen when you're very focused and you are doing something that you love and you just meet people naturally. Things click. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. And Marie.
Yeah, I could just add that since we did the crowdfunder and went to Comic-Con and all that stuff, we've actually gotten like opportunities to go to other events. Like I got to go to a local library event, and from that library event I learned about like a local book author expo that was going on that I never would have heard of otherwise. I got to get our books in that. Like we got the last table. And then we were part of the 12th annual Rhode Island Authors Expo. That was pretty exciting. We got to go to I got to go to the Neurodiversity Comic-Con in New York City. And so because of doing that, because of putting ourselves out there and going through it and doing the experiment, a lot of other opportunities opened up. So yeah, I'll just add that.
Excellent. Yeah, so let me as we're wrapping up, I want to drop two final tidbits, concepts for those of us who are still here. The first is mining for opportunity, right? It's a habit that I've gotten into in the past handful of years, and it has probably offered me more rewards than I would have thought possible. And so what do I mean by that is that some things, the results aren't always concrete, but there are things that you do that have ripple effects. And there's always the possibility that something that you've done already could be, quietly offering you the key to your next step. So I would encourage all of us here to take a look around, look at what we've done so far, look at how far we've come, and see if there are things in your journey that have been left there that could open up new opportunities for whatever project, collaboratively or individually, you have in mind. And then the last thing, we are in tumultuous times, to say the least. Who knows what any given person is dealing with at the moment, right? Fires, floods, etc. And so in that vein, right, we're starting off the new year. The one thing that people wiser than me have conveyed to me is that optimism is an act of will, right? Don't wait to just suddenly feel optimistic. You have to decide, and you have to take actions that foster that sense of optimism. And so here we are starting the year with this crazy project that is in the form that I don't think any of us would have imagined it would be when we started out, right? And so that's optimism and action. So I would encourage everyone here to kind of remember that, right? Optimism is an act of will, and that we all, as creators, have almost opportunity and a responsibility to kind of move that forward in the works that we create. And so, if no one else has anything to say, shall we call ourselves done for the moment? Are we in a good place? Can I get some thumbs up saying yes? Or excellent. Well, thank you all for staying these extra innings. I've had a great time, and like I said, I'm always inspired by the faces I see on these calls. So I look forward to seeing many of you again in the near future.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right, thank you all. I'm
Very
gonna hit
much.
end now.
Good
So
to see everyone.
take care. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.